this video is for complete Blender beginners. So if you just install Blender and open it and you see in this screen, this is a fantastic video for you. I'm going to show you how to set your Blender in order to be very effective with your modeling. Now, before we get started, I highly recommend you grab our Jumpstart course for Blender, which is a free course for beginners that will teach you all the basics, not just of the UI, but also of hard surface modeling, the modifiers, the menus, the workflow, the coming up with shapes, the blockouts, texturing, rendering, everything is explained in just a few hours. We have over 90,000 students and they love it. And like I said, the course is free. The link is in the video description, so grab it and enjoy. So let's talk about this screen here you're seeing right now. This screen you're going to be seeing only once and just the first time you open Blender initially, and you will never see it again. You have a chance to do a few major changes here, which by the way you can undo later on. But honestly, except for one setting here, I would just leave it alone. So for instance, I would not encourage you to import Blender settings from previous versions of Blender. You can see that I have a Blender 4.1 installed, and this is a 4.2 alpha, you can see in the bottom. And you can have as many versions of Blender as you want. I, for example, have 5 versions of Blender running on my PC. And it's very beneficial because you can copy from one Blender to another with Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V. You can have 2 Blender versions open at the same time and have 2 different models open. You can, move stuff between. You can just, do all kinds of stuff. You can also have different add-ons installed on different Blender versions. So it's really beneficial when you're going to get a bit more advanced. But the reason why you shouldn't be importing any settings from previous versions of Blender is because you're going to be importing config files. Now there are code changes between Blender version. Blender is evolving quite rapidly. So you could be actually introducing old config files to a new Blender version, which could cause problems, Blender crashing and all that. So ignore this. I would really recommend you not do that. Now, when you import settings of previous Blender, you're going to be importing add-ons, config files, settings, everything. So yes, it's very tempting, but trust me, it's not a good idea. Now, the only settings I will be changing here is basically to change the spacebar action from play to search. Now, I'm going to do this here. I'm going to show you how to do it in Blender later on, and I'll also show you why I would change this. I would just ignore this and click here, so we don't have to worry about it, okay? Now, if you open a Blender a second time, so let me just close it and open again, you will see a splash screen, which at the moment is gone. Now, splash screen is a little bit different. You'll be seeing this every time you open Blender, and honestly, I never use it, right? I don't find this useful at all. If you do, keep it, but for me, I don't need it, so I will switch it off and I'll show you how to do it, because this thing is going to pop every single time you open Blender. So click here, go to Edit, go to Preferences, and before we do anything, let's actually change the interface size because it's really, really small, so you probably can't see much. I'm going to click here and just change it to 1.4. That's much better. And then we're going to go here and turn off splash screen, okay? And then you go here, you go to switch auto save preferences because you want to have control over what's been saved, what's not been saved, and save preferences, and then click here to exit. And now when you open Blender, you're not going to be seeing this splash screen, okay? Now, let's talk about what we're seeing here. First of all, we are seeing a lot of junk in a viewport. We're seeing a camera, we're seeing a cube, and we're seeing a light bulb. Now, we're not needing any of these, and also we don't need a cube either because, you don't know if you're going to be starting with cylinder, cube, plane, torus, whatnot. So, it's another step to delete a cube. So honestly, I would just delete everything. That's how I set up my Blender. So click here, drag your mouse to select everything, press X, delete, and you're good to go. Another thing that we need to remove is this play bar on the bottom. And then remember I told you that we should be changing the spacebar binding, key binding to something else. Now when I press spacebar, you will see that animation will be played here, and also I see a FPS count here on the top. What this will do when you press it by accident in Blender can actually slow down your Blender a bit and also can conflict with rendering and other things. So honestly, I would turn it off. And the way you do that is you simply go here to Edit Preferences, you go to Key Map and you switch spacebar action from play to search, which is far more useful. Save Preferences, click here, and when you press spacebar now, you're gonna have the search menu, which is really useful because, for example, if you forgot, let's say, keybind for moving things in Blender, you just type here move, and you see object transform move, the keystroke is G. So now if I'm going to press Shift A to add a cube, right, and press G, I can actually move the cube. So you can search for stuff if you forget the keystroke. And this is far more useful than plain animation, right? Now we also don't need this bar because this is basically animation bar, and unless you're doing animations, you will not need it. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna collapse a window in Blender. You can collapse or open as many windows as you want to actually divide your scene into sections. Like for example here, these two are windows and you can collapse them if you don't want them. So what you want to do is you want to hover your mouse here in the corner until your cursor changes to a crosshair, click, drag down in the direction of the window, and then you see an arrow and then you release. So you can collapse any of these as well if you wanted to, right? So you could do that and you can mess up your scene completely. And I'll show you how to fix this, okay? So let's collapse this one here, right? Let's collapse this one. Let's open a smaller window here, okay? And let's change this one to what it was, which is properties, okay? So, you know, when anything happens to you in Blender, don't panic. You can always, you know, retrieve your settings. But there's a better way of doing this, and I'm going to show it to you now. So let's first align our scene, okay? To manipulate with your scene, to move around and pan in your, in the viewport, you simply hold your middle mouse button to rotate, okay? Press Shift and then hold middle mouse button to pan, and you can scroll in and out with your scroll on the mouse, okay? So one more time, middle mouse button, Shift and middle mouse button, and scroll on the mouse, okay? So let's align our scene here like this, so you can see the horizon, you can see a y-axis, x-axis, and then also here you can enable z-axis if you want to, and you can also disable and enable floor, okay? So you can see all the axes now. Now the default settings is fine, so I'm going to leave it like that and I'm good to go. Now what we want to do is we want to save these settings, because when you open Blender you don't want to repeat all these steps over and over again, right? This would be a tremendous waste of time. So what you want to do is you want to go here to File, you want to go to Defaults, and you want to go to Save Startup File and Override. Now when I open Blender, it's going to open exactly in the size of a window I chose. It's going to open with all the settings I set, and you're going to be ready to go. So now let me show you how to set other things in Blender that are very useful for hard surface modeling. Let's go to Preferences here, okay? And let's go to Interface, and let's see. I think Interface, we all good here, and there's nothing else we need to change. In Themes, though, there are a few things we can change. If we go to 3D Viewport, there are a few interesting settings here. Let's just expand this window. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a cube here. So Shift A, add a cube, so we can see colors while we're changing them. What I want to do is I want to have, first of all, my object selected to be white. I don't want it to be orange or whatever it is. I also want my active object to be white. It's just easier for me to see. Then I want my vertices, which is points in Blender, to be white as well. If you select the cube here, press Tab to change to edit mode, you will see that now vertices are white, but you can, change them to whatever color you want. I want them to be white, okay? Then if you press 2, you're going to be seeing edges, and we can change the edge selection here to be white as well. And then you got faces, which you press 3, you're going to select faces. And here on the face selection, you can change it to whatever you want. I want them to be slightly bluish, right? And I want the same color actually here. So there you go, kind of like a really pale blue. I sort of like it, all right? You can also copy hex code if you want to from one, from one to another. So let's copy this one, okay? Control C to this one, all right? Control V. Now I have the same color. Cool, I like that. Now, if you press 1 again here, you're going to see vertices. They're really, really small. So what we want to do, we want to go all the way down here, right? If we want to change the size of vertices to something a bit bigger, like 7. Now you can actually really easily see them, okay? I'm going to also change the object origin point to something bigger. Now, object origin point is something that you're going to see in the middle of an object. So if I press Tab here to go back, you see the dot here in the middle, the white dot? Is going to move with the object. That's the origin point of an object. All right. Every object has an origin. So if I Shift D to duplicate this cube and press G to move it, you see now I have 2 origins on both cubes. If I shift select them, you can see both origins in both cubes, all right? So it's selected, deleted. Now there's one more settings we need to change, and that's the face orientation front here, this one. Let me explain what it does. Polygons have two sides, okay? Let me just go here and press tab, press 3 for a face, select the face, press X to delete it, right, and delete faces. Now you can see inside of the model. So if I go here to this menu and I'm gonna enable face orientation, right, you will be able to see that the faces turned, blue and red, right? So now you can see that these colors, they basically depict two different orientations of faces. These ones are facing outward and these ones are facing inward. So if you have occasionally a flipped geometry, which means the face is flipped inside out. So when I go here, right, and I'm going to press Alt N, and I'm going to flip this face, you see that the face is flipped inside out, right? And that's a problem when you're going to be running bevels, booleans, model, etc. So you need to make sure that your orientation of your geometry is correct when you're modeling, so you don't get any artifacts or issues when you model. So what you want to do, let's flip it back, so Alt and then flip it back. So what you want to do is you want to be able to see all the red faces when you model. But it's very difficult to model when you see the blue and the red faces all the time. So what you can do here, you can actually turn off the blue settings and keep the red ones. So let me show you. You go here, okay, and you turn this alpha all the way to 0. And now you can see only the red faces. So whenever you have a red face in your mesh, you can very easily see very quickly that you have a problem in your mesh. So you don't have to turn these settings on and off for the flip faces. You can keep them on all the time. And it's really useful. It's going to save you a lot of time, okay? So let's just alt-click this loop here to select it. Press F to fill it with a face. And then press Tab to go to object mode. And now you have a cube. And we know that this cube is not flipped, okay? So let's save preferences and we're good to go here. Now, let's talk about navigation next because it's quite important. What you want to do is you want to turn off auto perspective. This thing is really freaking annoying. So it will automatically switch between orthographic and perspective when changing from, the views like top, bottom. I really don't recommend you keep it because if you are in perspective mode like here and you press numpad 5 to go into orthographic view, you want to actually stay in orthographic view, okay? So I want to have a control over this. It's much easier to model, so I want to turn it off. That's really annoying. By the way, I'm entering orthographic view. You can see here, or perspective by pressing numpad 5. Now, if you don't have numpad, you can always go to input and click on emulate numpad, okay? So let's just turn it off and let's turn on orbit around selection. This is really important. This will allow your camera, so when you pan around an object, orbit around the origin point of your object. So you're going to orbit around the object. It's very easy to look at the object from multiple sides, and you're going to be needing this for modeling. Now depth, you want to enable this. It's going to help you to scroll faster and closer to your object without any problems, okay? And then key maps are fine. We already changed this search button. System, that's important. You want to use CUDA if you're using NVIDIA cards. And you want to turn on the card support, but you don't want to turn on your CPU. Doesn't matter how strong your CPU is. You see, I have a really good CPU, but honestly, I don't use it because it's going to slow down your rendering. So honestly, don't use that. Just keep it at default. Undo steps, I would suggest putting max, which is basically 256. You can put just any number you want, but 256 is a max. And this is actually a good number of undo steps you want. So when you make a mistake, you press Ctrl Z to undo something, and you're gonna have 250 steps to go back, which is really useful, okay? Now, next thing we need to talk about is add-ons. These are really important. I'm gonna give you a list of add-ons that's gonna be very useful for hard surface modeling that I have enabled all the time. And they come with Blender, so they're free. First of all, it's gonna be Bool Tool. Bool Tool will allow you to use shortcuts with a numpad to perform Boolean operations like, deducting geometry, adding geometry. So for example, if I have this cube here and I'm going to shift D it like that, and I'm going to select this cube, I can press Ctrl- to perform Boolean operation. I don't have to select one cube, then another cube, then go into, modifier menu, then click on a cube. It's just too many operations. This is way quicker, way more intuitive, and you're really gonna like it, especially if you're not working with paid add-ons like Hardops and Box Cutter, which makes this even more quick. Next one you want is Edit Mesh Tools. This is fantastic. This is a context menu when you're in edit mode. So when you click on a model and you press tab to enter edit mode here, you can also switch here between edit and object mode. And right click on your mesh, you'll see you're gonna have Mesh Tools menu. And this is actually quite important. You see, you have flip normals, you can merge by distance, you can do all kinds, you can offset edges. There's quite a lot of very useful operations here that you might be using, especially again if you're not using paid add-ons. Another one is going to be loop tools. Loop tools will allow you to work with loops on a mesh. So for example, you have them here in edit mode. You can bridge stuff, you can create circles out of verts, you can flatten stuff, you can align stuff. It's really useful, and this is a fantastic add-on to run. Another one's gonna be F2 menu, which is for working with faces. Okay. Another one is 3D print toolbox here, which allows you, this is technically for printing, for 3D printing, but this add-on allows you to clean mesh very easy. So when I save preferences, go to end menu here, end panel, you will see this add-on here, and you can actually go to solid view here. Let me just collapse this. Go to solid views tab, select this mesh, go to clean up, go to make manifold, and it will actually remove all redundant topology that you don't need on that cube, and it will tell you here on the bottom what's happened, right? So in this case, removed 0 vertices, 0 edges, and 0 faces. But if you had some redundant topology here, it will just simply remove it. So it's a very nice cleanup tool, and I use it all the time. Next one's gonna be interface copy attributes menu. So what you can do with this add-on, you can actually copy modifiers, for example, from one mesh to another, or attributes from one mesh to another. This is very useful, and you can enable it by simply pressing Ctrl C, and you can see all kinds of attributes that you can copy from one mesh to another. This is super useful. Let's say that you had this mesh and you Shift D that, copy this in here, and you rotated the mesh. So now let's say that you wanted to copy the rotation, from this mesh to this mesh, right? So you select this mesh, Shift select this mesh, Ctrl C, and copy rotation. Let's press Alt R to reset it. It's very useful for working with hard surface when you want to align stuff. This add-on is extremely powerful, okay? Another add-on that's very useful is Node Wrangler. Node Wrangler is going to allow you to work with shortcuts for the node menu. And that's about it. You may also enable modifier tools. This is a very useful add-on, this one. Modifier tools and save preferences. This is a fantastic add-on. It will allow you to remove, apply and collapse modifiers in a stack with one click. So this is about it, and let's just select everything here and let's just press X and delete it. So we're gonna have a clean scene, and let's go here to File, Default, Save Startup File, and Override. Another feature that's really useful, and it's going to actually help you become better modeler. It's very simple but extremely powerful, and it's called Cavity. So let me add a cube here, and you can see that the border between these two faces is so hard to see. It's basically blending them two into one, kind of like a mess. This is very difficult to model like this because it's, you struggle with seeing the design language. So when you model something and you're trying to, create a design, you want to really see what the design ends. You want to see clearly the design language, and the Blender default settings are not very helpful here. So what you want to do is go here to this menu, Viewport Shading, and you want to enable Cavity. It's really important, okay? You want to enable Cavity. And Cavity is going to help you to see much better the edges. It's going to create like a highlight on this edge, and sort of like faking a bevel. And this will separate all these edges, and it will basically make reading the design language far more easy. And this is super useful for creating better designs. Next, we need to set up the render. Okay, so let's go here. Now here, when you click on this menu, you're gonna see some options. You're gonna see few render engines. The ones you want to be working with is either Eevee or Cycles. Eevee is real-time render engine, is very quick, but it's also quite limited, especially when it comes to bounce light, shadows. So in short, if you want to create some really realistic renders, you want to work with cycles, and that's what I suggest you set your renders to. Now, when you work with cycles, you don't want CPU to do all the work. You want it to switch to GPU compute. It's going to be much, much faster, right? Now, let's go here. These are samples, which means the basically quality of your preview in a viewport. You can leave it at 1000 if you want to. And this is actually samples for rendering. There's no way we need that many. We can switch it to 300, okay? And this is way enough. This basically tells Blender that you want to sample a scene 300 times in order to render it. So it's going to run 300 passes on the scene to render it, and that's more than enough, okay? Then you want to keep the noise. It's going to remove all the noise, all the fireflies and all kind of artifacts from the render. It's really great, this filter, so I'll keep it on. It's fantastic. So this is set. We can collapse that. And here on the light path, you may want to change these slightly. Now, this basically tells Blender how many light bounces the render engine should perform in order to create a render. So basically, the more bounces, the more accurate reflections, shadows, bounce light, and all that, right? So you can see here you have diffuse, glossy surfaces, transmissive surfaces, transparent surfaces, volumetrics, etc. So my settings are a bit of overkill, but honestly, you will be fine with, let's say, I would say 12, even 8 here will be fine, 6, and probably 12, or maybe even 8 here, and maybe 8 or 12 here will be fine. My settings are 18, okay, 16, I'm going with an overkill 16, 12, 12. That's what I have set, all right? Then under film, we're going to be turning on transparent. This is for an HDRI image. I'll be showing this to you in a minute. We're going to be setting lighting for our scene for renders because you need lighting. But turn it on for now. It's good to have it on by default, okay? Now, under performance here, this is quite important. This is going to be telling Blender how many tiles Blender should be splitting an image into. So if you're rendering in 2K, it's going to be 1 tile, okay? If you're rendering in 4K, it's going to be 2 tiles. So this depends on your hardware. So you need to basically, try with your card and start with 2048, go down to, maybe 1024 or go to 4096. It really depends on the card. I'm using 490 and 2048 is fine for me. It just renders in seconds. Honestly, I don't bother with this. But from my experience, I know that, if you have different card or different system, you might want to play with this, and it actually may speed up or slow down your renders. So just, see what works for you here. And then we need to go here to output. This is basically telling Blender what kind of file you want to output. This is a bit small, so I would go here with 2560 by 1440. This is 16 by 9, but a bit higher resolution. And then under here, I would go with not PNG, but TIFF. It's by quality, 16-bit, and also no compression, and the rest is fine. And this is literally all you need to have set up for your render. We can click here as a default menu. You can go here to File, Defaults, Save Startup File, Overwrite, and we're good to go. Now let's set the HDRI file. So hover over here in the bottom and expand the window. Go here to Shader Editor, right? Go to World, and under World you will see 2 nodes, okay? Now, because we enabled Node Wrangler, remember this add-on that allows you to work with nodes, we can use a shortcut key Ctrl-T. So click on this background and Ctrl-T to add these 3 nodes. Now, these nodes are going to basically help you to inject light into a scene. So go to internet and type Polyheaven Abandoned Slipway. And go here and go to 4K, right? 4K, and download it. Once you download it, I want you to go here to this icon and load your texture. Then navigate to the folder when you have it. In your case, it's going to be download. Click on Abandoned Slipway, open image, and you will see it here. Now, nothing changes because we are in 3D viewport, right? Here, you can see on the top, we're in a viewport shading. We need to switch to rendered shading, which is here. So when I switch to render shading, you will see that the scene changed. So when I now press Shift A and add a cube, And I'm going to go here to material, and I'm going to add a material to it, pressing new, and I'll change color of that material to something else. You now will see that we have a lighting in our scene. And now remember, under this menu here on the film, we turn off transparency, and I told you this actually turns off the visibility of the HDRI texture. Now watch what happens when I turn it off. Now you can actually see the HDRI in your scene, and you can basically, align your cube or your view however you want. So you could use the background in rendering as well, or you could just use it for lighting. And this node here in the middle will allow you to actually rotate this scene in order to rotate the lighting in your scene. So let's say you're going to set the camera from this angle, and you want it to light to come from the right hand side. We need to rotate this texture to the right. So we need to go here to this rotation on the z-axis, right? And we need to move it to the right, and the scene's going to rotate and the light's going to rotate. And that's how you set up lighting in your scene, okay? Another thing you can do is change the strength of it here to, let's say, 1.2, and up the light a bit, make it a bit stronger, right? By default, I would suggest you stick to default settings here. So 0 degrees on the axis, strength at 1. You can collapse this menu down here. We can turn off the visibility. So, click on transparency. Delete this cube, we don't need it. Go back to viewport shading, right? Align our scene. And then collapse this film here. Go to File, Defaults, Save Startup File, Override. And now you got Blender set up, the way I have it set up, and you're good to go. And all you're missing now is the paid add-ons, which of course I suggest you get, especially machine tools and hard ups and box cutter. They are fantastic, and they will just make your life much easier. All the links to add-ons are in the video description. Now, like I said in the beginning of this video, if you're a complete beginner and you want to learn more about Blender and hard surface modeling, we have a fantastic tutorial for you. It's actually a course. It's free. There's over 90,000 students who enrolled, and they absolutely love it. It will teach you all the basics in just a few hours without, needing to go through all kinds of fragmented videos on YouTube and trying to piece all this knowledge together. And in just one day, you can master all the basics and start having fun in Blender. Alright guys, well that's it for this video. Hope it helps you out. This is how you set up Blender from scratch, and every time you install new Blender, just run through these settings. Once you get up to speed, it takes like 10 minutes to do it. It's really easy, and you're gonna be good to go. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.